Hello and welcome to Stampscaping 101. I'm going to work on another scene here featuring a wintry type of image, but I'm going to use it in a way that doesn't depict a winter scene. You can take kind of non-winter imagery and make it into a cool winter image just by using certain colors and doing certain effects to it. And by that same token, with a lot of wintry types of images, just by using a different color palette, you should be able to turn that winter image into something akin to, a depiction of a different time of a year, perhaps. Let me see. I'm using this kind of at an angle here because my acrylic block isn't large enough, so let me see if I can get the orientation of this correct. Okay, let's go for about right there. Plenty of center pressuring, especially on large stamps. Okay. You can see it's kind of a snowy type of brook there. And this is the cabin with fence. Okay, and we'll just put it right down about like so. This is a quarter-page card that I'm using. It is Kromecote 12-point weight, double-sided glossy. I don't necessarily recommend, double-sided. I mean, I'm really not using the other side for a different scene or something like that. I just use this little portion of that tree just to fill in that little area. I have a little opening right there. Maybe that's where the little stream's kind of flowing through. But anyways, I happen to have a ream of the double-sided Kromecote. I used to like that a lot. And by the way, I mean, in the previous video I was using the double-sided Kromecote, and all these particular inks that I used dried and set up just fine on them. Sometimes certain combinations of paper and inks kind of dry to a kind of a dull sheen. If that ever happens with you, if that's what you find, just kind of spray off the scenes before they kind of set up and dry completely, and they should retain the kind of the luster, the brilliance of a, kind of a deeply saturated ink, as in how it looks right after you stamp it when it's still kind of moist. Sometimes it looks real shiny and deep, but some combinations of inks will dry, like I said, to kind of a duller, matte-looking finish. Sometimes you can spray them and it brings back the, the saturation depth, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I'll have to go back in and add a little bit more ink to it and then spray it. But, the great equalizer is if you just kind of spray these things before they kind of dry, and you won't have that problem. But like I said, the Kromecote took to the Ranger and the Marvy inks just fine, and it looked nice and saturated and glossy, and I could let it dry. And usually I spray them anyway, because I like the depth that comes about from the, spraying. Okay, I'm going into the scene using number 52 Marvy matchable pad, and that's a nice bright color. I tell you what though, before I do that, let's go with some kind of a thicker ink here. This is the Aqua Adirondacks, and let's add some of that first, okay? That's a little bit too much. I want a little bit more control. I can tell that I've kind of smeared some of the ink underneath it. The black ink that hadn't dried completely yet. I'm not going to worry about that. Unless it was really smearing or something like that. Just some of the larger areas of darkness, you know, didn't dry yet. So, but you know, I don't know. I mean, if you've seen some of these videos, you've seen kind of how much ink ends up being applied on here, you know, so those kind of preliminary little smears or something like that, I don't see as really being a problem at all. Okay, adding in. This is going up into kind of the sky and horizon. I did add the blue down below, you know, where everything's going to kind of end up being green anyway in the grass, because blue is a part of green. You just add yellow to it and it makes it green, so I can use that in both areas just fine. And I can also use it in the water, of course. Okay, so it's kind of a base coat. Again, Adirondack Lights. Aqua. Used to be called Seashells by Ranger. Naming convention changed. They're now Adirondack Lights. Okay, so adding the green in here, and it's supposed to kind of eventually look like grass. I know it doesn't right now, but that's because I'm just going through a couple different colors so far, just kind of establishing a base coat, and also establishing, I got a real big streak there of black. I'm establishing kind of the lighting, so you can see on some of these little areas right here, little raised areas, I'm kind of leaving it a little bit lighter, making it look like it's capturing some of that light. So you're kind of getting a base coat down and establishing your lighting scheme using the lightest of colors. Okay, so a lot of colors to come, so just kind of allow your scenes to develop nice and gradually. Don't rush it. Getting those things established in the first couple of colors are really so important. And don't worry about it either. The darker you go, you know, the less application of ink you'll have to do. So it's not as if, you know, every color is going to take as long as the first one or two colors. Alright? Usually the darkest colors are in the shadows or on the perimeter of the scene, unless you're working in, you know, doing like a nighttime scene or something like that. Alright, so you can kind of see where am I putting my incrementally darker colors. This one happens to be a pale green. It's a nice light green, kind of a dull green. It's not real intense in terms of the brightness. Good color to go with. It's a second tone in this color scheme. Like right around this cabin, why don't I like to kind of put a little bit of shadow at the base of the cabin, kind of making it set into the scene, giving it weight and opacity, meaning, you know, the light isn't coming through it. I'm going to get to that cabin too. I'm going to do some brown tones on it. Okay. Let's go with jungle green. Test it out in a little corner. It's just kind of a little bit incrementally darker than the first two colors in combination with one another. I know it's looking really bright and kind of weird right now, you know, in terms of the, you know, that particular saturation and intensity of the green, but it'll all kind of mellow out once I get into some of the other colors to come. Kind of angling the applicator. You got an angle that's conducive for the spot that I'm using them in. Use it for the full dab, like this, in a wide area, and I turn it at an angle, like that. Let's see if I can get this on canvas. See, I kind of have this at a little angle in that little area right there. That's a little bit darker on the image, so I just reiterate it with some more tone. This area right here. So I can see the shadows on the designs. I add more shadow with my inks. Okay, coming around. Let's go real bright. Light green. It's a real kind of electric green. It's a good base coat. I don't like it to be too prominent in terms of a pure color when it comes to the scene. In other words, I usually don't have it somewhere where it's just this isolated, super bright green. I usually have something going over the top of it. But even if you layer dye-based ink over the top of it, this brightness will be showing through the top layer because dye-based inks are transparent. Transparent as opposed to translucent or opaque. Translucent means you can kind of see through it a little bit. Transparent means it's more clear. And opaque, of course, means, you know, kind of a little bit more less see-through, you know, in terms of light coming through it. It'd be like as if you put like a pigment ink on top. That would be more opaque. Okay. Very bright. Let's establish some of the darker greens now. Well, this is going on really green. This green is really bright, so let's kind of spread that around a little bit more and not do too deep of an application with it. In other words, that's a deep application of it like that. So I'm just kind of spreading it around a little bit. See how I can spread it around there? That was the that's the Adirondack lights doing the job. You know, it's kind of real slippery. It's established a real good foundation of I don't know, it's almost like a sealant, at least while it's wet. And it allows these other types of inks to just glide over the top really nicely and spread around and blend. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's get into a pine green. After this color, I'll go to the color that's kind of my secret weapon when it comes to grassy areas, and that's the Marvy number 6 brown. Just kind of a real basic brown, but laid over the top of the greens. I really like what it does to them. It kind of reads as a little bit of shadow and kind of mellows out the intensity a little bit, and get, you know, warm. Brown is this particular brand of or shade of brown is a warm brown, so it's adding warmth into that area. without it being so kind of fluorescent electric green in there. Okay, maybe kind of darken off the bottom a little bit. Okay. So far, so good. Why don't we go down to a little bit of darker brown, and this will be the end of part 1. I'll get to the sky and cabin and water in the next video. Okay? So stay tuned for part 2.